Now you've set out some toys, you think you've picked some great ones, and your child doesn't seem to be very interested in them or is kind of fighting you with a little bit on when you're trying to help them, and you've already looked at things in the environment and those don't seem to be a challenge. Now you should look at the toys themselves and figure out if there's an issue with the toys that you've chosen. So one of the first things to look at is whether you've played those toys before using the beginning play skills that we've already presented about, where you've practiced them with the child, shown them how to appropriately manipulate the objects and how to add on pieces and how to handle some of the fine motor things that come up. If you haven't done that yet, you probably shouldn't select those toys to put out. You really want to put out things for your child to play with independently that you have already seen that they know how to play with pretty well. Then you want to look at if those are already the types of things that you've selected. There might be some small physical issue with the toy. For example, maybe the puzzle that you've chosen, one of the pieces is very hard to put in, and when your child is playing, they can put in all the other pieces correctly, but that one is hard. And so if you've put that puzzle out and you're not there to help them, they might not even begin the puzzle at all because they see that piece and they know that they're not going to be able to do it independently when they come to it. So if that's the case, then play around with how you set up the toys. For example, you might always put out that puzzle with that challenging piece already in it, so that when your child walks up to it, they see that the hard part has already been done and they don't have to worry about it. Or you might select, for example, if you choose some of the blocks, you might pick just the thick, chunky pieces because you know those are easy for your child to put on, but the really thin, skinny ones need a little bit of help from you. And since we don't want to have to be there to help them, don't put out the thin, skinny pieces. Really kind of look at how you've also put them out in the environment. It could be that if the pieces are really close to each other on the table, it's easy for your child to pick them up and keep going, but if they're further spread apart and it's a little bit more effortful for them to reach them, they might give up after a few. And really play around with how you set these up in the independent play times. And feel free to go back and do a little bit more practice with them on some of those earlier play skills where you're really interacting with them and looking for those things that might be tricky when you put them out independently. Let's talk for a few minutes about expectations. When we move from playing with your child and helping them and really being engaged to now expecting them to play independently, we want to make sure that your expectations of them and their expectations of the activity are fairly similar, or else there's going to be some disappointment and it might not be very successful. So think about what you were doing with them when you were playing with those toys, practicing those beginning play skills, and if you are setting out some of the same toys for them to play with, as we've talked about, think about how you think they're going to play with them independently versus when they were playing with you. They're not going to play with the toys in the same way that they were when you were sitting there modeling and shaping and guiding them. And some of the things that they're going to do as they're playing are just kid things, like looking out the window or getting distracted or playing with the material. And you might find that they're playing with some of the toys in a way that doesn't really match how the toy is meant to be played with, that they didn't do so much when you were playing with them. And that's okay, as long as they're kind of going back and forth between the way that you technically should play with the toy and the way that they might be playing with them. One rule of thumb is to look at waiting about 3 to 5 seconds in between each play movement or each type of play before you might jump in or try to prompt or shape any of their play. And I'll show you a few examples of that here with some of these toys. When they're doing a puzzle, you might find that as they pick up each piece, they like the sound of the puzzle. So they might tap them a little bit against their ear, or they might tap them on the table. Again, if that's a few seconds and then they put the piece in, no need to stop any of that or change that. They might like the look of a particular piece and maybe they're gonna sit and look at the picture for a minute because it's cool. That's totally fine too. If they're doing something like flying the piece around in the air and now it's gotten past 5 seconds, now would be a time to maybe shape that to put it back in the puzzle. But they're going to do some other distractible things as they're going. And again, as long as they're still doing the puzzle and kind of come back to it, it's fine. With a set of blocks like this, you might find that they start putting off the pieces in here, and then maybe they end up building a second one over here. It's not what you were thinking, but it's still fine. If as they're putting the pieces, they might tap some of them together or maybe line them up. Again, if it's just for a little while and then they keep putting them together, that's fine. Or you might find that maybe this piece is really cool and see-through and they're standing looking at it out the window and looking how everything is purple. Again, that's an appropriate thing to do with this toy. It may not be building, but as long as that doesn't take up the entire time playing, that's fine too. So really take some time to think about that as you select the toys out here, and really sit back even when you're tempted to jump in and give them a little bit of time to just play around with the materials as long as they continue to engage with them appropriately.